Holton, who eventually put it in, and Dennis Law in on top of that. And Jim Holton, as he did, Beckenbauer.
6'2", eyes of blue. Big Jim Holton's after you. Once, Old Trafford couldn't stop singing his name. Today, most football fans have never heard it. That is the tragedy of Big Jim Holton. Not how he played, not how he died, but how a man who gave everything to the game slowly disappeared from its memory. He was one of the toughest defenders of his generation. A Manchester United hero, a Scotland international, a World Cup warrior. The kind of player who threw his body where others feared to put a boot. Supporters believed giants like Jim Holton would last forever. They don't. One day, the noise fades. The chants become echoes. New heroes arrive. Old ones quietly disappear, until a player who once filled stadiums becomes little more than a forgotten name in football history. Subscribe now. Because this isn't just the story of Big Jim Holton. It's the story of how football can celebrate a hero, then quietly leave him behind. And it all began with one moment, one injury, that changed everything. Before Old Trafford, before the World Cup, Jim Holton was a young Scot chasing a dream. Born on 11th of April 1951 in Lesmahagow, Lanarkshire, he wanted to play for Celtic. Instead, Celtic said no. Holton refused to give up. He crossed the border. He signed for West Bromwich Albion. Another chance. Another rejection. He never played a single first-team match. 2 clubs had already given up on him. Most careers end there. His didn't. In 1969, everything changed. Harry Gregg saw something others had missed. The former Manchester United goalkeeper, the hero of the Munich air disaster, believed in the young defender. Gregg signed him for Shrewsbury Town. For the first time, someone gave Jim Holton a real opportunity. He didn't waste it. Holton played 67 league games. He became the rock of Shrewsbury's defence. Every tackle mattered. Every header earned respect. Slowly, the doubters disappeared. The scouts arrived. Then came the phone call that changed his life. In January 1973, Manchester United manager Tommy Docherty signed the 21-year-old Scot for around £80,000. The giant nobody wanted was finally walking into Old Trafford. He believed he had reached the top. He had no idea his greatest battle was still to come. It was the dream he had fought for. But the club he joined was struggling. The great Matt Busby era was over. Confidence had disappeared. So had the trophies. Old Trafford needed fighters. Holton became one. He never hid. He never pulled out of a tackle. Every header mattered. Every challenge was personal. Supporters saw it immediately. Soon, the Stretford End had its own anthem. 6'2", eyes of blue. Big Jim Holton's after you. The chant wasn't for the club's biggest star. It was for the man who gave everything. Then came the 1973-74 season, one of the darkest in Manchester United's history. The unthinkable happened. United were relegated from the First Division. There was anger. There was heartbreak. There was blame. But not for Jim Holton. The supporters knew who had kept fighting until the end. That season, they voted him Manchester United's Supporters Player of the Year. A remarkable honour, in a year of complete disappointment. It should have been the start of his greatest years. Instead, it became the peak of his career. Because football was about to take away everything he had worked so hard to build. It happened on 7 December 1974. Manchester United were playing Sheffield Wednesday at Hillsborough. It looked like an ordinary afternoon. It wasn't. During the match, Jim Holton suffered a horrific broken leg. The stadium fell silent. One moment, he was leading United's defence. The next, he was being carried from the pitch. Football never waits. Players do. The recovery lasted months. Every day was a battle. To walk again, to run again, to play again. Holton refused to quit. He fought his way back into training and reserve football, but he never reached United's first team again. Supporters thought the nightmare was over. It had only paused. A serious knee injury followed. Then came the final blow. Playing for the reserve team against Bury, Holton broke the same leg again. This time, there was no miracle comeback. He never played another first-team match for Manchester United. He was only 24 years old. The player who had conquered rejection had finally met an opponent he couldn't beat. For many players, a career like that would have been over. Jim Holton refused to accept it. He rebuilt himself, slowly, painfully, and in 1974, he achieved what every Scottish footballer dreamed of. He wore his country's shirt at the FIFA World Cup in West Germany. Manager Willie Ormond trusted him on football's biggest stage. Holton started all 3 group matches, against Zaire, against Yugoslavia, and against the mighty Brazil. Scotland never lost a game. 1 win, 2 draws, unbeaten. Yet somehow, they were eliminated on goal difference. It remains one of the cruelest exits in World Cup history. Holton had done his job. He had helped Scotland hold the reigning world champions, Brazil, to a 0-0 draw. But football doesn't always reward courage. Sometimes, it only remembers who went through. Scotland went home. Holton returned to club football, still carrying the scars of his injuries, still believing his best years were ahead of him. He couldn't know that the game had already taken the best of his career. Manchester United had moved on. Jim Holton had no choice. He had to do the same. In 1976, he left Old Trafford. Not because he wanted to, because football had changed around him. Many believed his best days were over. Holton refused to believe it. He took his game to North America, joining the Miami Toros in the Nassau. It was a fresh start, a chance to prove he still belonged. He later returned to England with Sunderland. Then, in March 1977, another opportunity arrived. Coventry City. Once again, Holton earned everything. He wasn't the same player who had thrilled the Stretford End. The injuries had taken their toll, but they hadn't taken his courage. He played 91 league matches for Coventry. Week after week, he kept battling. The speed had faded. The pain hadn't. But neither had his determination. Jim Holton had lost the career he should have had. He refused to lose the love of the game. It was the last great fight of a man who never stopped getting back up. By the early 1980s, Jim Holton knew his playing days were ending. The body that had carried him through so many battles could no longer keep fighting. He retired from professional football, not with a grand farewell, not with packed stadiums, just quietly, like so many players before him. Away from football, Holton built a different life. He became a publican in Coventry. He enjoyed meeting supporters, talking football, sharing old memories. For the first time in years, life seemed calmer. Then tragedy struck. On 4th of October 1993, after a fitness session, Jim Holton suffered a heart attack. He died at just 42 years old, an age when many former footballers are only beginning to enjoy life after the game. He left behind his wife and 2 children. The giant who had terrified strikers for years was gone far too soon. But the saddest part of Jim Holton's story was still to come. Jim Holton was gone. Football carried on. New seasons began. New heroes arrived. The chant slowly faded. So did his name. Today, most supporters remember the great Manchester United teams. The trophies, the legends, the glory. Far fewer remember the giant who stood beside the club when there was very little glory to celebrate. That is the cruel side of football. It remembers success. It often forgets sacrifice. Jim Holton never lifted the biggest trophies. He never became a global superstar. But he gave Manchester United everything he had. His body, his courage, his career. In return, football slowly forgot him. Not because he wasn't good enough, because fate never gave him the years he deserved. And that may be the greatest tragedy of Big Jim Holton's life. Football remembers trophies. Football remembers champions. But some players leave behind something greater: respect. Jim Holton played more than 300 Football League matches. He earned 15 caps for Scotland, scored 2 international goals, and proudly represented his country at the 1974 FIFA World Cup. Standing 6 feet 2 inches tall, he wasn't known for tricks or elegance. He was known for courage, for commitment, for never taking a step backwards. Tommy Docherty once called him one of the bravest players he had ever managed. The supporters never argued. They answered with a chant. 6'2", eyes of blue, Big Jim Holton's after you. Those words echoed around Old Trafford. Today, they deserve to echo again, because the real tragedy of Jim Holton wasn't how his story ended. It was how quietly football allowed his story to fade. A player who survived rejection, who reached the World Cup, who became the heartbeat of Manchester United during one of its darkest chapters, yet somehow became one of football's forgotten giants. If you believe players like Jim Holton deserve to be remembered, subscribe now. Every week, we bring another forgotten football legend back into the spotlight. And before you go, tell us in the comments, which forgotten footballer should we honour next? Because history shouldn't belong only to the players who lifted the biggest trophies. It should also remember the giants who gave the game everything they had.